People just coming in through. Let's give it a quick start. Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. I'm pleased to introduce our speaker, Ms. Kira Brennan, APPA Sustainability Manager. During the most recent APPA AU NZ Roadshow, Kira hosted an incredibly engaging workshop where she introduced the APPA ESG Roadmap, a practical guide designed to help businesses within the promotional products industry strengthen their sustainability practices, enhance social responsibility, and align with global ESG standards. Today's 45-minute session is a great opportunity for those who missed that live workshop to gain valuable insights and practical strategies, whether you're just starting in your ESG journey or looking to build on the initiatives you already have in place. If you do have any questions during the session, please feel free to pop them into the chat bar and we'll address them at the end. But please join me in welcoming Kira.
Morning, everyone. Thanks, Nat. So as Nat had mentioned, I am the Sustainability Manager here at APPA, and this is a recap session for those who missed out during Roadshow on APPA's environmental, social and governance briefing. So just to give a little bit of background about myself, I studied a master's in climate change, agriculture and food security prior to coming to Australia. And since then, I've worked in the environmental engineering field. I've worked with the EPA, the Environmental Protection Authority in Melbourne, and then started with APPA in this role back in September. So just to highlight APPA's strategic plan for 2024 to 2027, our focus as an association is to advocate, educate and enhance our community. And this is very much complemented by our work that we are now doing in the sustainability field as well. So today's session, what I would love everyone to walk away with is an understanding as to why we are doing this, what APPA is doing as an association and what we are asking of our members. And there will be a call to action at the end, simply to register your interest in taking part in the official launch of the ESG program, which will be happening in June of this year. And it is a recurring theme throughout this presentation where I do like to highlight the importance of community. I think as APPA members and as an association, we do have a really unique advantage in the sense that there are so many individuals that are in a similar position to what you are in, and it's a resource that is free, it's easy, it builds relationships, and it's just a very accessible resource that I don't think is capitalized on enough. So we're trying to encourage that as much as possible here today as well. So just to start with the why, which can be a multifactorial question, and depending on your motivation, it can be business and profits, it can be purely environmental, it can be ethical, or a combination of multiple. Because I do have a primarily environmental background, I do like to take a moment just to highlight the importance of why we're doing it from that standpoint. So just a quick anecdote, when I was doing my master's, we submitted a report on the COP conferences that were happening in Edinburgh of that year. And the COP conference, for those who don't know, is ran by the UN. It's the biggest climate conference in the world. And the focus for that year's conference was keeping 1.5 alive. And 1.5 is in reference to the degrees Celsius in rising above pre-industrial levels. And that was only in 2022. And in 3 short years, we have already surpassed that 1.5 degrees and are now aiming to stay below 2, when back when we were still talking about 1.5, we had mentioned that it was this turning point, a critical point of avoiding irreversible damage. There was a major focus on island nation speakers at that conference who have such little contributions to huge industries that are causing irreversible climate damage, but are seeing the worst effects of it through biodiversity collapse, rising sea levels, all of these things. And I do think that climate experts and scientists have been talking about this for years, but we really are now seeing the effects of this in our everyday lives, in our local communities and environments and everything. So it is something not to be ignored. But from a business perspective, and I do think that the reason why laws and legislation have come into place is that historically we have seen that promoting sustainability as something that is simply the right thing to do hasn't worked. That moral obligation isn't enough of a motivator to incite real change. And that has been recognized by governments and different governing bodies across the world. So we are seeing this enforced implementation of these changes, like I say, through laws and legislation. So in order to continue acting or continue operating legally as a business, these standards need to be met. In terms of consumer demand, there's been a plethora of market research carried out, not just focusing on younger generations as a means of proving a point, but also highlighting the fact that the majority of the buying power has now shifted from has now shifted towards Gen Z and millennials, and their values and their buying habits are so much different to what had been seen before. In the age of technology, everything is at your fingertips. It is very common for individuals to look up product reviews before purchasing, look up the history of the company. They're widely educated on what is a genuinely sustainable material, what are reputable certifications that they can look for that logo or look for that brand and see that that is something that aligns with their own personal values and is something that they're happy to give their money towards, and often comes with a higher price point, which I do think speaks volumes, particularly in a cost of living crisis, that people are still wanting to invest in things that they truly believe in. And this also comes down to employee acquisition as well, and the younger workforce. They put a lot of value on well-being and a culture of ESG within the business, ensuring that they feel supported and that the practices that are and policies that are carried out by that company align with what they also believe in. And this is also reflected in stakeholder engagement. So because this movement has come so far in just a few short years, it is something that has a large amount of reach, and it is something that is very, very appealing for other brands and other businesses to associate themselves with. It can be seen as almost tarnishing a reputation if you are operating well as your own individual business and you've got strong practices, but then to move towards another company or business that does not have that, it takes away from the effort that you have made yourself. So in order to continue those relationships and collaborate with wider businesses, this is something that will be of a huge advantage. And speaking from coming from an EU country, and that is where the most of my knowledge around sustainable products and what I had studied had come from. Coming to Australia, you can see that the standards are slightly lower, and that we are aiming to accelerate and meet those standards that have already been set and adhered to in the EU, in the US, in the UK. And it is just hugely limiting not to meet those standards because you are cutting your reach in in a fraction of what it could be. And it would also boost your engagement in Australia, seeing that you are a pioneer in this movement as well. So what's in it for your business? I do think that the main deterring factor that has limited or stopped businesses in engaging in sustainability has been the initial upfront investment and the perceived lack of return on that investment. And I do think that maybe this is a narrative that has stuck with the idea of sustainability, but from a much, much earlier stage in its inception phase, where the materials weren't as sustainable materials weren't as widely as available, or the technology was a lot less advanced than what it is now. So not only is the cost of these things much lower, but the return is much greater because there are more people taking part and more people demanding this. Like, to my next point, new generating sales and acquiring new clients is something that will naturally add to the financial benefits of implementing these changes. Loyal and happy workforce, I do think that this may not be seen as an obvious way of saving money, but then when you do think of the time that it takes to advertise, interview, train new staff, not just from a money perspective, but from the time and investment that that takes as well as just pandering to the ethical side of operating as a business, it all leads into saving money and having a happy workforce. Greater collaboration opportunities, as I had mentioned, with stakeholders. Same goes for distributors. If you are supplying to a distributor who are wanting to gain a sustainability certification, they cannot achieve that if they are accepting product from you that does not meet the standards in which they are going for. So that is highly limiting as well from a business perspective. And as I had mentioned, the global market as well, there are much more significant laws and legislation in place between EU product passports and other things that are becoming more and more advanced and more innovative. So the longer it takes to make that leap into at least taking that first step towards a sustainable business model, the more and more unachievable it will seem, and the more it will detrimentally affect your business and your operating success. And of course, like I had mentioned already, operating within legal requirements is naturally paramount. So with APPA, we have elected to take a 3-year focus for our ESG roadmap. Working as a community, we want to help change the perception of the promotional products industry and keep that industry as relevant as it always has been and as essential as it always has been. So in year 1, we are focusing on net zero emissions, starting with business and then product. What we mean by that is focusing on your immediate business practices and then working out towards your supply chain. Because once you have that working knowledge of what you're looking for in terms of emissions, it's much easier then to ask for that information from offshore manufacturers and things like that. Year 2 will be focusing on net waste. So we've got the 2027 packaging targets looming. So that is in order to ensure that everyone is prepared for the implications of those targets and that they are prepared for them. And then in year 3, we'll be focusing on circular economy. And we do like to point out as well that there is a cumulative advantage to the work that you do each year. It isn't just ticking off one exercise and then starting from the beginning again, they all naturally feed into each other. So the work that you do in year one will help with year two, and so on. The work that you have done in years 1 and 2 will help with year three. So as you progress, your workload gradually lightens. So just a little bit more detail on net waste. In Australia, there is the 2024 National Waste Action Plan, and they have set targets for 2030, some of those being a 10% reduction in waste per person, or an 80%, or not or, and an 80% resource recovery per person by 2030. And again, this naturally highlights the overlap between the different focuses. So resource recovery is very much in reference to a circular economy practice, because it is limiting the amount of material going to landfill or being directly disposed of, and not simply towards just recycling. It is repurposing and reusing for new and novel purposes. In support of this as well, the Australian Packaging Covenant Organisation, they have set a 2030 strategic plan, and they have taken the focus away from setting targets and rather implementing additional charges for unsustainable practices. So the use of materials that are difficult to recycle, difficult to reuse, will come with an extra fee, and packaging will be priced by volume rather than just by weight. So I'm sure we've all had packages arrive where it's this big box and full of filling material, and then it's that tiny product inside that you had actually ordered. So they're really clamping down on things like that. And then in New Zealand, they have already transitioned to a circular economy strategy. Like I say, it is more of a stepwise focus with Australia, even though the National Waste Policy Action Plan does incorporate circular practices. They all lead into one another. So New Zealand has gone straight to a circular economy strategy, which I will talk about next. So just to round off Australia, there are circular practices included in the Waste Reduction and Recycling Act 2021, and also in the National Waste Policy Action Plan, which are becoming more widely implemented, but as of yet they do not have a specific circular strategy in place. And then in New Zealand, they have adopted a primary focus on tackling waste reduction, aiming to be as circular as possible by 2050. And they have also adopted a three-phased strategy. So by 2030, they want to start seeing a change in behavior. So this is throughout the community, making small changes, educating the local population as to why this is the next step above recycling and the reasons behind it and what it involves to increase that engagement, which will lead to the success of meeting the 2040 target, which is widespread circular management of materials. And then finally in 2050, to have achieved a low emission, low waste circular economy. So for the net zero emissions, that is our year one focus. And APPA will primarily be providing guidance and education around this area, hoping to keep as much autonomy within our membership as possible. Everyone's business is so nuanced. There are different regulations for different products that are supplied, materials used, sourcing from different countries, supplying to different countries. So it is equipping everyone with the information to confidently undertake that process themselves. Now, of course, there is the option to pay for a consulting service and have all of that done for you, but I don't think that that is the best way to go, and also not financially feasible for certain people. So it's our aim to ensure that everyone feels as though that they can take on this process themselves and with ease. We do, however, have recommended service providers. There are some technical elements to these processes, like carbon accounting, for example, that requires a specific type of software and things like that. So APPA has begun and is continuing to develop a recommended service provider list that we will provide to our membership and those who are taking part to aid in some of the more tricky steps for ESG and carbon accounting and all of those like reports that need to be submitted. We are also developing a service provider list in terms of education and seminars. So we have an ESG workshop coming up in June with a colleague of ours, which is an intensive short course. We have also spoken with other people that are going to focus on materiality for our suppliers and different things like that. So there is resources there for people to fall back on, but the primary focus and intention of that is to increase understanding so that you feel, once you have been through year one, for example, that you understand the process and you're happy to phase out these additional helps and take on the process fully yourself. And what will also aid in this is, like I had said from the beginning, the community aspect of the APPA membership. So, for example, if you were going for a B Corp certification and it was your first time submitting that application, and you get to a section where you're not quite sure what they're asking you for, there will be members who have been through a similar process or been through the exact same process and are able to help you out and tell you that's how you answer this one. So it's just a very easy way of driving success. And then to our resource library, this is something that I have created just because I do think that it's not always the best time when an email reaches you linking an article about greenwashing, for example, but that's something that you would be interested in reading at a later point or when you've got some free time. So our resource library has all of these sources of information, whether it's scientific journal articles or just a simple blog post. We have them signposted in terms of category and topic, but also in terms of density and density of information. So depending on where you are with your understanding of a specific topic, there is something that will be there for you that will either challenge your knowledge or will just reaffirm what you already know, which I think is really helpful. So our emissions reduction program that is launching in June 2025 at our roundtable events. And some of the things that we will be rounding off in those sessions are how to conduct an ESG gap analysis or an audit, identifying where your emissions are coming from and how to reduce them, how to set targets, and how to stay on track in order to achieve them. It isn't a process that is set in stone, that once you have set your targets, that's it, or once you have set your policies and your practices, that they are the ones that you're sticking with. There will be some that work really well, and there will be some that still need some tweaking. And that is why we have a 6-month check-in in our first year of reporting and a 12-month. And then after that, it will just be one annual check-in. But it is important to continually monitor your progress. We will be here to support that and any issues that may arise or something that's not progressing as well as you hoped it would. We will be here as a reference point on how to troubleshoot that. And we will also be handling some of the reporting as well. So APPA will keep its own database to also be able to use it as a good news story for a member who reduced their emissions by 10% in the first year or something like that. And that is also an advantage that we have, where APPA has a platform that we can echo the good news and the efforts that you are making, which can in turn be used for marketing and self-promotion. And as I had mentioned as well, we also have that ESG workshop, which covers everything off from environment, social, and governance, and just in a great amount of detail. So those education events will be happening, all of them in June, and will be very interactive as well. Will be broken down into focus groups with real life examples. So we hope to see you at those. I just wanted to quickly mention grants as well. It is something that can be hugely beneficial as it is a significant financial aid. The application process can be quite lengthy and quite dense, so it is something that does take quite a bit of dedication in terms of time, and also potentially something that would be more accessible in the second year once you understand where your emissions are coming from and you've been reporting on them. And then these are the efforts that you've been making. These are your future projections for how you're going to reduce further. But they are very widely available. Ones that are national and ones that are state specific. So I do encourage everyone to do their research and take these. These are one of the some of the main examples, but there are much more niche ones that may fit into your business, and it's 100% worth looking into. So next steps is to simply register your interest. Like I had mentioned, our roundtable sessions are happening in June of this year. They will be complemented by webinars and education workshops, like I had mentioned already. If you scan the QR that's on screen now, that will take you to the section of the APPA website where you can register your interest. And we have some time now for a little Q&A if anyone has any areas that remain unclear. If there's nothing coming to mind right now, I'm always available at kira@appa.com. Just shoot me an email with any concerns or questions that you have, and I'll be sure to get back to you. But yeah, thanks everyone for listening and taking the time out of your busy mornings.